Is that agreed? Agreed. The question is that the bill be now read a second time, and I call on Senator Lynn Ruane to speak, and you have 12 minutes, Senator.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Minister for our time today, and also in the lead-up to the preparation of this legislation, and the Justice Department and the Health Department in relation to when I've sought for advice and some input from you. You were very kind to give up your time, so I'd like to acknowledge that. I would also like to acknowledge that we will be looking towards the National Drug Strategy, and we have also just been told that we will have the Deputy O'Quailon and the Justice Committee are also willing to look at the bill in the autumn, so I'd like to thank the Justice Committee for that. I'm proud to introduce this legislation, and especially while in the gallery there are so many people from an area that I have dedicated my life to, and I would like to recognise everyone in the gallery today for their long hard work in the area of drug use and addiction. And I would like to obviously especially thanks to Eireann, who has to Senator Eireann, who has worked very closely with me on this piece of legislation, has co-sponsored and co-signed the bill. So I would like to thank him, the Civil Engagement Group for their support, and all the independents in the House that have also co-signed this bill, shown the support that is there for it. I would also like to quickly, before I get into it, also thank and recognise Lynn Ruane, who is in the gallery today, who I've often spoke about how I entered the drugs field at a very early age, at the age of 17, not long out of my own drug use and my own criminality, I suppose, and Lynn O'Brien took a chance on me and invested in me and empowered me to work in that area, something that not everybody who's criminalised for drug use will have the opportunity to do. So I'd like to have it on the record and thank Lynn O'Brien for all his hard work in Killinarden for all these years. I will address the specific provisions of the legislation in a moment, but I feel it's important to start today with explaining why I have dedicated most of my life to the study and treatment of addiction, and as a result, why I have brought this legislation before the House today. It is more than just me standing here in this chamber doing my job as a legislator. This bill is about me, it's about my family, it's about my friends, it's about my community and the communities across this country that engage in drug use and drug abuse. It's about the hundreds of people I have supported, advocated on behalf of, and also laid to rest after dying prematurely from drug-related deaths. I have been a drug user myself. I have developed drug addiction programmes since I was 17, and I continue to support friends and my community on a daily basis with the often lifelong lasting impact of drug use and addiction. I have no doubt in my mind that the current punishing, shaming, stigmatising and criminalising of drug use has failed in deterring people from using drugs. Drug use spans across all of society, but problem drug use is primarily concentrated in areas of deprivation, where poverty is already difficult to escape. Being able to navigate your way through socio-economic disadvantage is almost impossible with a conviction for possession. We must and we should recognise the economic influences that create and reinforce patterns of addiction and criminality, and begin to change policy to unravel some of those patterns, so we no longer punish and prosecute marginal populations in the name of morality. I see criminalisation of drugs as a form of criminalisation of poverty, given the high numbers of the working class that find themselves in the prison system for drug possession. Currently in Ireland, we spend millions every year on legal aid, probation and prison. This is a cost that goes nowhere to creating change in a person's life in relation to their drug use. Life after addiction is difficult enough. Most have to find new ways to pass the day, new friends and new environments. In that search for a new sense of themselves, finding employment and having the option to travel and not being labelled as a criminal is key to their development. Not having access to services, support and employment often results in a person falling back into addiction, as they find it too hard to integrate into normal working societies because of their convictions. I have seen this many times in areas such as social work and youth and community, whereby a person is denied access to a course because of a conviction they had in previous years for possession. Recovery can be a very lonely place, and to support a person in staying in that recovery, education and employment are crucial. We have a history in Ireland of putting people in prison unjustly. People experiencing addiction have a complex set of needs that can never be met and supported in the legal system. Take 2013, for example. A total of 679 deaths in Ireland were linked to drug use. The number of non-poisoning deaths recorded among drug users was 292 in 2013. Deaths owing to hanging continue to be the main cause of non-overdose drug-related deaths, accounting for 25% of all non-poisoning deaths in 2013. We will never know how many of those deaths could have been avoided if we didn't treat drug users as criminals, and instead by treating addiction as an issue of public health. The crux of this argument for me is that it is on us as a society to reduce the harm of people that experience addiction, that experiment with drugs, or that use drugs recreationally. It is up to us as a society and as representatives of that society to leave this country better than we found it. Ask yourself this. If your daughter or son was caught in possession of ecstasy tablets at a music festival, where do you want them to go? When someone experiencing addiction to heroin is caught in possession, where shall we send them? Should they be sent to a criminal system that reinforces trauma? A system that all evidence shows has done nothing to either deter people from using drugs or improve their situations. In fact, it's a system that removes the opportunity for full recovery and intervention. 76% of all drug convictions are for simple possession. Prison time and convictions don't address the issue of drugs. What prison and conviction does do is creates a barrier to education, creates a barrier to employment, stigmatises and shames a person already suffering and struggling. Prison acts as a gateway to criminality, doesn't stop it. All of these compound the cycle of addiction, criminality, poverty and disconnection. What we can and should do is refer people to a purpose-built and humane system that recognises the complexities and many forms that drug use takes, to a system managed by experts in the field of health, law and addiction that are able to treat people found in possession of drugs with fairness and compassion. That instead of sending our young people and people experiencing addiction to a courtroom, that they instead meet with an experienced case officer who is able to recommend the best course of action for the person and with the person. Surely a system where we are able to inform people about drugs or support people with drugs in accessing rehabilitative treatment or to reconnect with their communities through community engagement initiatives is better than them ending up in Mountjoy prison. That's what we're debating here today. Drug use is going to happen. It's going to continue to impact lives. Nothing that we do as an Oireachtas will ever result in the elimination of drug consumption. All we can do as legislators is control how the state reacts to drug use and how it treats people who use drugs. So this question is, when someone that you know and love is found in possession of drugs, who do you think you want to work with them? Is it a Garda and a judge, or even a prison guard? Or is it a health professional and an addiction worker? That's what I think this bill boils down to. And the question that we should ask all ourselves here today is, do we support or do we ignore the evidence and continue to punish and propagate criminality? I'm going to now give a brief overview of the main provisions of the bill itself. Section 3 inserts a new section into the original Misuse of Drugs Act 1977, which decriminalises the possession of controlled drugs for personal use, provided it doesn't exceed the quantity allowed for personal use. Section 3(2) allows for the Minister to set by regulation the amount allowed for personal use. Section 3 also maintains the criminalisation of possession of drugs in excess of personal use and specifically states that nothing in this section will impact at all cases where a person possesses drugs with intent to sell. It's important to note that this legislation maintains strict criminalisation placed on drug dealing and selling. It simply provides for the decriminalisation of the individual that uses them. Section 5 allows for An Garda Síochána to refer persons found in possession of drugs to a new drug dissuasion service for assessment. Every person found in possession of drugs, whether it be within the allowed amount or in excess, will be referred to the service. This bill simply allows for a referral to a tailor-made and targeted service rather than a punitive criminal justice environment. Section 10 to 16 outlines the structure, functions, leadership and accountability of the new Drug Dissuasion Service. The service will be led by a Director-General who will be directly accountable to the Oireachtas. When drafting this bill, we look to other examples of quasi-judicial bodies that already existed within Irish legislation, and so, as a result, much of the sections relating to the service draw on the structures that were established for the Workplace Relations Commission by the 2015 Act. The Drug Dissuasion Service will be administered by representatives from the Departments of Justice and Health and experts in the field of drug counselling and addiction. This would be to ensure that the work of the service would be cross-departmental in nature and informed by expertise. The service would be able to appoint case officers who would handle the individual assessments and to conduct harm reduction research and to inform the public in relation to controlled substances. Sections 17, 18, 19 and 20 refer to the functions of the service's case officers and the cases assessment and recommendation processes. In terms of the process, the engagement between a referred person and their case officer is intended to be informal and at a time and place set by the officer. Case officers will be informed of the details of the possession, hear from the person themselves and consider a number of factors, including age, addiction, personal circumstances, criminal record and previous engagement with the Drug Dissuasion Service. Following the consideration of all of this, the case officer will be able to recommend attendance at a drug awareness programme, drug rehabilitation or community engagement process. Those are the provisions of the bill. It is product of months of input from international experts, from domestic experts such as Niall Nelligan, who was the primary drafter of the bill, who is here today, and across a range of fields, from people who work in drug services and from people who use drugs. I am confident that it is the right first step towards a more progressive, humane and realistic approach to drug policy, one that focuses on the individual at the heart of drug use. I have worked in this field for almost all my adult life, and I would not be putting it before you all here today if I didn't think it would have an immeasurable positive impact on the lives of thousands of people across this country, because I promise you that it will. I will finish on a phone call I just received as I walked in here from my daughter, who is only 16, who has also had her life impacted indirectly by addiction. And she said to me, "You know this is so important, ma'am, don't you?" And that's a child, and I just feel that if children can see the logical sense in not putting people experiencing drug addiction in prison, well, I think it's on us all here today to realise that if the children can see it, there's something wrong with us if we can't see that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.